Hello and welcome to today's Fat Tail Daily video. Today I'm joined by James Cooper, our resources analyst and expert and former geo, full-time geo I should say. James, how you doing, buddy?
Good, thanks, Woody. Good to be back here.
Now, keen-eyed watchers will know, viewers will see that your background's a bit different and there's a bit of a hum going on in the background. You got one of those things around your neck. Where are you?
Yeah. So I'm at the IMARC. So it's a big mining conference. It happens in Sydney once a year. So it's the IMARC conference. We went through the abbreviation before.
It's the International Mining and Resources Conference and Expo.
That's the one. So it's a big mining conference. There's a few of these that happen around the world. There's one in Toronto. There's one in Sydney, which is this one. And there's one in London, I believe. So big gathering of mining insiders, investors, junior mining stocks, big mining stocks. We heard from big keynote speakers throughout the conference. So I guess it's good just for getting a vibe of the overall direction in the industry. I think this year they talked about how it was I think it broke the record, so it was the biggest attendance yesterday. So
Right.
That's certainly a good sign where the industry is going. I think with the stimulus in China in September, I think that's really helped just sort of boost up the sort of mood in the industry a little bit. I guess just something I've picked up over the last few days. It's a 3-day event, so it's pretty comprehensive. There's a real focus on critical minerals. I know investment-wise, it's not really been a big theme over the last 18 months with a lot of critical mineral stocks being impacted pretty heavily.
Yeah.
But there's this really strong government push still. So I was talking to someone from the UK resource sector. So she just works with that branch, and she flew over from London to be here, and she talked about how the push is for critical minerals. And I think there's a lot of delegates here from different countries interested in looking at Aussie critical mineral stocks and what they can do to secure their own supply chains. I think it's still a really key issue, despite that investment theme sort of dropping off the radar in recent months.
But that's the key thing about going to these things. You get to talk to people on the ground and get private conversations. Whereas I remember one of our team members back in 2010 went to the oil and gas conference in Houston. And what they discovered back then was the fracking story, which was being talked about. It wasn't necessarily big in the mainstream press, but it gave us a big clue. Is there anything you're learning on the ground that gives your readers a bit of an advantage?
I think, so we spoke about the critical minerals, so that's still a really big theme, and that's being led by a government push rather than a sort of investor push. So that's probably one of the key takeaways. Another interesting thing that's really become apparent just being at one of these events is just the impact that artificial intelligence, so tech, is starting to really infiltrate into mining. So we all know that tech's been a really big story over the last sort of 10 years, whereas mining is really like the last frontier for tech. It hasn't really penetrated into that market yet, but that's something that was really apparent at this year's IMARC conference, just the number of companies which are starting to turn to AI, and that's not just mining, it's also into exploration, so finding new deposits using artificial intelligence to sort of increase the probabilities and increase the sort of the chances of finding new deposits. And I think that's really, really key if we're going to sort of meet these big mineral shortages which are looming in the face of underinvestment.
In your piece today, you're like, even though you're out and about and on the ground, you still kind of did your Fat Tail Daily today, and you gave us a bit of an insight into what you're covering at Diggers and Drillers, which is your paid letter where you make specific recommendations in the mining sector. Now, you kind of discuss how exploration and mining capex, so the capital expenditure, are still below cyclical highs. yet showing signs of recovery. I was just wondering, like, what key indicators suggest that we're approaching a more bullish phase of the commodity cycle?
So the commodity cycle, it's really dictated by what I've been talking about. So supply is really underpinning prices. So that's really like the floor for prices, and that's what I detailed in today's piece.
Yeah.
So it was a snippet from a report we sent out to our paid readership group at Diggers and Drillers, and the supply has really been built. The supply issue has really been built from lack of investment in exploration and new mine developments over the last sort of 10 years or so. But what will really sort of drive the cycle into the next sort of more bullish phase will be the demand. So I guess that's what's been lacking over the last sort of 2 or 3 years. I think a lot of people have been really quite bullish on commodities, on the long-term outlook, but there's been really no meaningful increase in commodity prices other than gold. That's really just stood out amongst all the commodities. But I think once we get a clear demand driver, that will start to shift. So the sort of foundation of lack of supply will then start to really become visible once we start to get some demand. And where that comes from, I mean, it's China stimulus is probably the most obvious one. We saw signals of that in September last month. But I think we'll still need more meaningful stimulus into 2025 if we're going to see a sort of super cycle type commodity event take place. There's also the critical minerals push. I think there's geopolitical issues, companies trying to secure supply chains. There's a whole lot of sort of complex factors, I think, which could lift demand sort of over the next coming few years. And it's not just a China story, which was really the story of the last commodities boom. I think that will still be important, but there's a lot more factors, I think, that will come into play in this coming boom. And I think that's what investors should be watching.
You also highlight copper as a commodity leader that's climbed despite numerous global challenges. Like, how does copper's performance inform your broader view on where we are in the commodity cycle?
Yeah, so as readers would know, I've followed copper really closely.
Yeah.
It tends to lead in commodity cycles. So as does gold, precious metals, they tend to lead. That's just because they're sort of key. They are a key commodity, so it's used, especially copper. It's used in infrastructure, but it's also a key commodity in the sort of renewable space. It's also a really important commodity in terms of geopolitical tensions. So as we talk about countries rearming, Donald Trump's pushing NATO to increase its defense budget, buy more military armaments from the US, and this is all driving up demand for copper in the years ahead. But then coming back to the supply issue, and there hasn't been that investment. So you can kind of track that on the charts. So something I was looking at is just the threats to copper, which is a key global growth commodity over the last 5 years, has been really been quite something. So copper's really climbed a sort of insurmountable wall of glory over the last 5 years. We had pandemics, we had sort of a rapidly rising inflation, which slowed down growth in the West, a rising US dollar. So all these factors would tend to be bearish for copper prices, but it's been rising or trending over throughout that time. So copper prices steadily been trending throughout that time. There's been pullbacks along the way. We saw a big pullback midway through this year, and that was a really good buying opportunity if you believe in sort of long-term story for copper. So I think if that's still the case, then I think there's still plenty of opportunity. I think once the demand starts to pick up, that's when we'll start to really see copper prices start to lift from their sort of more subdued levels, which has been the case over the last
Yeah,
few months.
right. I was gonna final question. Are there any? Because I know you're recommending quite a number of companies in diggers and drillers. Are there any of the companies there at the event or?
That's right. Yeah. So I've been talking to a lot of companies. We've got it's actually really convenient because you've got all the junior mining stocks under one roof, and bigger companies as well. So that's for me that's really handy because you can talk to the MDs, exploration managers, which come to these events, and you can just chat to get the word from the horse's mouth directly, which is really useful. And you can sort of uh, get updates about companies. As it is. I mean, obviously they can't tell you any information that's not sort of already publicly known, but
Yeah.
you can get insights that perhaps um, wouldn't be visible through the
I was
regulated
going to say
space.
because surely you got to be able to tell a sales pitch, right? From a like with your experience and your knowledge of the rocks and the the minerals from a geologist perspective, does that give you a bit of a what's the word? An advantage to telling what's actually really going on beneath the surface. That when you can separate what's a sales thing, because they're going to obviously they've got a conference with loads of investors in. They're going to give you the best story, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure. And absolutely. So the geology background helps. So I think it's more about just uh, going past the sales pitch. So we already know what the company does
Yeah.
and what its assets are. So it's really sort of maybe digging into other things that you wouldn't be able to get if you weren't seeing these people in person. So just learning more about the team,
Yeah.
learning about uh, what the company's ambitions are longer term, which sort of fall outside just the sort of general quarterly reporting. So that's probably what the most useful insights you can get from these sort of conferences.
Good stuff. So what's on for the rest of the day over there?
Uh, I'll probably be here for a couple more hours. So yeah, if there's any listeners, I met up with a few readers yesterday, which
All
is
right, some readers there. Cool.
really good to see them in person. So we're a few here throughout the day. So hopefully we'll see a few more today. And yeah, if you're around, please let me know and we can have a chat.
Awesome. All right, mate. I'll leave you to it. James, thanks for your time. I know you're in a bit of a public space there, and it's probably not the easiest place to have a call, but appreciate you taking some time out to talk to us.
No problem. Thanks, Woody.